the nature of the mind. And the nature of the mind is the nature of everything. So it's not mind as in my mind, me as a separate non-subject, but it is mind as the ground condition in which all experience arises. And when we have this experience, everything becomes changed. So that would be, to continue with the example, when you recognize that this foam and the beer are the same, the foam is not so interesting. You might like to taste it a little bit, but really, you know it's just from the beer. It doesn't have a fascination in itself. So when we recognize that everything is arising from this ground nature, we become more interested in the ground nature and less in the details of the foam. So it means that we have we're not so hungry for the things in the world. It doesn't mean that we don't want them or we don't want to enjoy different things, but we don't have a hidden agenda in relation to these things. For example, I'm increasingly of the opinion, and I may have said it in this situation before, that many people who come to psychotherapy are looking, from the therapist and from other people in their lives now, they're looking for someone who will give them all the love they never had in their life. So there is an ordinary adult-to-adult relationship, and they bring hidden into this the desire that you are this enormous earth mother who will take away all their pain. This is very confusing and contaminating if it's not described, because it always leads to frustration. And many people take this into their love relationships, that they want the other person to provide the complete compensation for their lives. So they are overloading a possibility of getting something of value by a demand which turns the value into nothing, because they always end up being frustrated with the person. And you could say that the same thing happens in samsara. Because of ignorance, if we say this is the beer and this is the foam, we have the basis and we have this. In samsara, we lose the sight of this basis. It gets covered over in some way. So we then just have the foam, but we're looking always to the foam to give us the experience of the basis. We don't even know what the basis is, but we just come for it. Just as the patient who falls in love with someone and wants this person to give them everything of their life is not aware that that's some childhood emptiness that's being revisited, because they've forgotten about that, it's covered over. So in the same way, in samsara, people look to motor cars and football teams and possessions of various kinds and developing their own qualities, as if getting more and more of these things will fill up this hole. We don't know what the hole is, but it presences itself. And when we get some more direct realization of what is underneath, of this ground nature, the work which can be done by the ground is then done by the ground. And when the work is done by the ground, that need, that infinite need, is taken care of by infinity. Of course, this ground nature is very big. Emptiness has no boundary. So then you can return to these things on the surface and enjoy them. This is the idea of living with pleasure, is that you can be content with what is there and not look for something on the surface to meet the need of the depth. If you meet the need of the depth with depth, then the needs of the surface become much lighter. And that's really what it means to live with non-attachment. It doesn't mean that you don't have ordinary human attachments and you don't take care of your children. Clearly we are attached to our children. But if you become attached to your children, wanting them to had a happy life because you didn't have a happy life. If you got some stuff from yourself, you're putting into them, that fucks it up. But if you can be fresh with them, then you can have a lot of liveliness, and then they go off and they do their thing, and you're still full. But the person who is waiting at home for the child to come back and tell them what nice things they did has a hunger which the child doesn't like. What did you do at school today? How was it? Well, it's just the same.
Ich muss mich selber bremsen.
So this possibility of having a completion and a fulfillment from the depth makes us much lighter in the world towards other people. And I think that's a really helpful thing. Because we have all encountered in ourselves and in other people this terrible hunger. I mean, I have it sometimes with my mother when I go home to see her. I'll be sitting reading and I look across and she's looking at me with these eyes. And she wants something from me. That I'm somehow the magical child that should have brought something into her life, and she's still looking for it. She's very old now, but she still wants it. She doesn't know what it is, but there is something missing. It makes me feel terribly sad. I want to say, "Stop! What are you looking at me for?" This terrible, and that's an enormous sadness. It's an enormous sadness, and we can see how what's happening with Kosovo, and how it goes into politics as well. People want to take other people's countries. They want this hunger for something. Very, very difficult. Now, in the old days, in Europe, people had a stronger belief in God and in Jesus. And that, in some ways, is very good, because that's some kind of communication between these two levels. It's not in a direct mystical or meditative way, but it's at least there symbolically, so that this ground nature is now up here, and one prays up and says, please send something down. And there can be some hope of that some of this will go into me and take away some of the emptiness.
It hurts. It doesn't fix properly.
But anyway, in the Christian tradition, God's used to being hurt, so he doesn't mind. But then it goes away again, because it can't be sustained. So then you have confession, and then Mass, and you get it in again, you do bad things, it goes out again. It's that kind of wave. It's very difficult to hold it there, because although people can have real religious faith and can have real experiences in Christianity, there's no doubt of that, a lot of it is being done as a representation. So that is to say, it's happening on the symbolic dimension. And if you go in a nice old Christian church, and look at the stained glass or paintings, I mean, they are beautiful. And these three stages of this Holy Ghost and Father and Son is not very different from the three Kayas. A very similar idea. And in Sufi tradition, a very similar ideas as well. It's very old, it was there before Buddhism, that's for sure. However, what's missing a little bit in Christianity is any real discussion of the nature of the Holy Ghost. Because the Holy Ghost is in everyone, it's immanent, but it's transcendent and is even above God. This dove is flying above God's head. So it's not clear how that is, and theologians are always a bit uncertain, because the basic structure is dualistic. So the good things have to be up there, and we are down here, and we hope one day to get up near to God. But we can never think of being in God or having God in us, because that is dogmatically incorrect.
It is, for example, in the African Christian church, it's a bit different. And also in Jamaica, because they have like ecstasy or mythical connections, and if they sing, because they sing and dance, and sometimes they get like overwhelmed by ecstasy and so on and so on. I mean, that is very practical. Also, they have speak about dreams and symbols, and it's different than here, but it's Christian.
But it's a mixture with the
Mixture,
old tradition.
yeah,
It's
the
not
same.
pure Christian.
Yeah.
So it's mixed with the Voodoo religion
Yeah.
from West Africa.
Just as well.
Yeah, but before here they also danced. Before the Middle Age.
Yeah, there was shamanism.
Yeah.
And in the Gnostic churches in the Middle East, the priest dances before the altar. They do the dance of the dove. Which is very
But there is a Gnostic Christian church?
Yeah, in the Middle East, well, it's in the Gnostic tradition. Seen in films of them, they're very beautiful. They have this screen in front of the altar.
Where is it?
And
Mittelosten.
And-
Nahosten.
for the Mass, they do this dance to bring the blessing down,
Yeah.
which is very beautiful. Very old traditions, which is not so different from tantric dancing and all the rest of it. Near Damascus, they have some of these places, and in Beirut, up in the hills, many of the small monasteries are in small valleys. They've been there for 1,000 years.
The Gnostic, as far as I understand it, before they were the ones who invented the Holy Ghost, and they were before Christianity. One of the roots, at least.
But some of these lines were incorporated in Christianity, and these small churches continued. Anyway, the principle, hopefully, is quite clear. Is that big hunger needs big food, and the biggest food is emptiness, which is a kind of paradoxical thing. Now, if we don't have that, we need to make use of other foods, and that's why in the Nyingma tradition we do pujas and prayers of various kinds, as well as doing direct meditation, because prayer is also you can understand it on these two levels. That prayer is on the horizontal level, it helps us to feel better, it gives us some thoughts, some kind of hope, so it's kind of containing and directing. But on an energetic level, prayer also, when we pray like this very intensively, we are centering this circle of energy around our heart, helps the heart to open. When the heart chakra opens, it permits a better flow through these other chakras, and then you have an integration through the energy system of the body. It pulls our attention away from the world, from the horizontal dimension, and towards the vertical, which is very important, and most of the time we're busy trying to adjust things. It gives us a hope, a bit like in this Christian Our Father prayer, when we say, give us each day our daily bread. This idea that the bread that we eat is coming from God, it's not coming from the supermarket. The supermarket is only the horizontal exchange, but really it comes from God. This is exactly the same as in Buddhism. So we pray to Padmasambhava to help with many things, and in Tibetan villages they pray to Padmasambhava for the rain, for food, for the cattle to be healthy, for everything. At the same time they have cattle doctors and they take care to plant the seeds at the right time. But religious faith is very good for the integration of these two dimensions. So, learning to pray, developing faith, having faith, for example, in the idea of Buddha lands, of Sangdopari or Dzogchen, or many of the Buddha realms, Kachopa, again is helpful because it gives the idea of a pure dimension where there are no problems. And just the hope of that can be very lightening for some people. Other people would not find it a very attractive idea, they'd find it unrealistic. But for many people, just the thought of, fuck it, when it's all over, I want to be there. Like the weekend, or when I retire. It's like a Sangdopari condominium. No more trouble there. But these these symbols are useful because they give a kind of time out. And if your life is very, very busy and enmeshed, just to have the hope of something else is very useful. I remember reading some research that was done that people felt happier thinking about going on holiday and looking at holiday brochures than when they were actually on holiday.
Yeah.
I can understand that.
So when you pray to go to Zangapali, it's like the holiday brochure. And there the notice will open and everyone's smiling. Oh wow, yeah, and you get the nice room. It gives some hope. Now hope opens up the space. Because if you hope something will come to you. And
But when it doesn't come.
When you're on holidays. And the room is not so nice.
Oh, it's very nice to have a hope. There's lots of space, and of course there is a little bit the danger of illusions, but it can be a good feeling.
yeah.
Now, and what happens then?
But that's why you should offer things after you die. So you won't know till it's too late. It's till you arrive at the little hotel in Greece and you find there is no roof on it. I mean, I think that's the whole thing, is that whether these places exist or not, if we have faith in them, they function to just take time out. And for most people who have these busy, covered over lives, there is never time out. It's always a displacement of hope by the demands of the world, and that gets more and more pressing for many people. More and more, certainly in Britain, people work much longer hours in Britain than they do in Germany. And we have much worse social benefits, we have much shorter holidays, because we follow this American system. And it's not very good, but Europe may well move in that direction as well, if this world economy collapse continues. And there's always at a certain point, the work takes on such a momentum that you forget what a holiday is. And very often people I experience in the hospital, they come back from the holiday, and then they think, I wish I'd never had a holiday, because it makes me realize I don't like my work. But I can't live not liking my work if I have to do it. So it's almost better not to have a holiday. And that is like samsara, where you get more and more trouble, and then you don't want anything, you just get on with it. Just to keep the blinkers on, somehow as a balance.
The Sangha body and so on, is that not a matter, a question what the reality is? Because if you say that the reality is what exists in your mind, and if somebody, let's say, is very fantasyful or something, and can really imagine, now I'm here and really visualize Padmasambhava and is very happy, isn't that in that moment his reality? Because even if he's sitting under the bridge, and in this moment he's very happy, isn't that his reality? But that means that somebody is real. That is not an illusion and it's not a hope, but in this moment it's real for him.
Yeah, that could be true as well.
Because isn't that, whether this place exists or not, it exists only, in our minds.
Well, everything exists for me.
Yeah.
So being under the
So
bridge also
it's-
exists, yeah. I think for each of us, it's like seeing whether we have a connection with this way of being and whether it's true for us. Some people have quite a, if you like, a strong Sambhogakaya connection. Maybe in childhood they had imaginary friends, or they were very good at imagining things and they spent a lot of time in daydreams. For people like that, Zandapali is probably a very good method, because they have a connection on this Sambhogakaya symbolic dimension. And for other people who maybe don't have that at all, it's much better maybe to do Shine practice and observing the breath and then going into observing thoughts in the mind. Because if you try to use a method which isn't suitable to you, it won't be so helpful.
I see the problem of people postponing their lives to the weekend or to after their pension, after they're pensioned, and one day or after they're dead, one day I will be in paradise. Now it's still crazy and I have to work all this. It doesn't have to be, if I can be there now in the Sangha Purgatory without opium, then fine. But this later, this carrot in front of the nose that I...
Well, it depends. See, I think it depends how it works. I mean, maybe I said before, just on the big station in London, big graffiti on the wall that says, "Near at hand is far away in thoughts of elsewhere." In thoughts of elsewhere. I mean, what is here is actually far away if you're thinking of something else. So, it's not exactly a carrot, because while you're thinking of this other place, you're not here. And if you have time out, it's like a holiday. You can feel refreshed. And it also then diminishes the reality of what's here, because if you can be out of what's here is not then some kind of total domination that takes you over, because you can imagine somewhere else. And if you read the studies of people who survived the concentration camps, they often say that the people who survived best were those who could maintain some memory of something else. So they had little clubs that did Latin grammar and all kind of things like that to connecting with what was elsewhere. But the ones who just got into this shit that was everywhere just went down because there was nothing else to hold on to. So I think in that way one can see it as a method. So it's the same, like even if you can't do much breathing practice or yoga or whatever, if you do even 15 minutes of stretches in a day, it somehow opens up and you have a different relation with your body. You may lose it again quickly, but somehow you now have a polarity. You don't just have one vision. You have a hope of freedom is there. So maybe it's not exactly like a seduction. It actually is an interruption, hopefully.
That's right. I think it's a very good method for me, because when I had this trouble with the feet, I sometimes wasn't able to meditate properly, or I thought. I wasn't able to breathe. And then I took a photograph from holidays, which I liked. And that was a break. First I thought, you're very stupid, you are running away from your things. But when I looked at it, there came a break. And then I could start again with breathing and things like that. It really helped. First I thought it's stupid. Oh, illusions, you are not on holidays, you have pain, you are in trouble, and so on. But then I felt that this break gave me the possibility again to come back to breathing or meditating, even when it wasn't for a long time, but it worked. Ajay Klaptran didn't work so much, he was very far away. But never mind, I accepted that. Yes.
I mean, they often talk in the language of this net of illusion, net of stupidity, with the idea that it's something that's kind of thrown over us so that we just get caught up in it and we don't see anything else. So essentially anything that cuts into that and opens just a little bit of space somehow brings some kind of hope. And yesterday when we were doing this pet, that has a similar function. But you can use pleasure for subversion as well. Watching TV. They've just done a very big research in Britain on happiness, and one of the things they found was that watching soap operas made people happy. People who regularly watch soap operas on television are statistically happier than the average population.
Let's cancel. Was ist denn
But they found,
Diese Leninstraße.
Ja, das sind aber auch eher so Operetten, ne?
Nee. Leben, Geschichten aus dem Leben.
but you found that if you watched a lot of general television, that didn't make you happy. That made you more unhappy.
Yeah.
But it's something about going into other people's lives and knowing these characters, and you're taken out of your own life for a while. It's a kind of it's time out. It's fantasy, but it's a space of possibility.
I know this very well from in former times. I really love to go to cinema when I'm very depressed. And I can go there on my own, I don't need anybody else, and I sit there for 2 hours, and I'm the type, I can completely go in the film, I come out, and life has changed completely. I can be happy again.
But that's a good thing for practicing Dzogchen, is to have a range of these kind of methods. Because sometimes if you are down, to struggle to shift your state is no good. It's better just to plug into something. As we've talked in the past, put on some music and dance a little bit, or whatever it is, make love, do what's nice to shift your mood, and then go into the practice. But to try to do the practice from a level which is far away from it is not really going to help. So, but if we go back to what we began with this morning, everything can be practiced if we understand it. So it's not that only Dharma activities are Dharma and everything else is against the Dharma. If we understand that energetically everything is in Dharma, then we have more freedom to make use of anything. But it has to be with awareness and with a sense of what the purpose is. So, the key thing for that is observing our own condition to see what our current state is, but also what is useful for us. Just because some holy person tells you that a practice is a good practice, doesn't mean that it's good for you. And we have more and more understanding of this in terms of nutrition, that people's bodies require very different foods. The kind of food that I eat would certainly poison any other people. It's probably poisoning me too, but that's my blind spot. So we have to find a way of, looking at what is good for us, what is actually working, what gives us energy, and what allows us to continue with what we're doing.
May I add something? Mr. Kohl was asked whether the Social Democrats this year were his downfall. My downfall? No, Marzipan is my downfall. Hans mein Untergang. Nicht Sozialdemokraten.
But in the far it goes, he really gets some humor, huh?
Yeah.
He didn't yet. He gets fresh again now. The burden is taken away from him. He was never so before.
He's funny.
And that's so important to see that, because we can go on and on in the same groups with the same responsibilities all our lives, feeling that if we don't do it, no one will do it. And this is the biggest delusion. To put down burdens, to take time out going to the cinema, to be silly, is very, very good. Seriousness is not helpful. It really is not.
Ich brauche mich nicht anzugucken.
Because seriousness is a sign of attachment, and the ultimate way of blackmailing people in Britain is to talk about a sick child, or a murdered child, or a raped child. This is how these cheap newspapers sell their copy by big. Everybody, and you can't have any thought except bad. Karma doesn't come into it. Oh, who has done this bad thing to this poor innocent? And it's very serious and very heavy, and you daren't make any kind of joke about that. But traditionally people would joke about things. And there are lots of jokes about Jesus on the cross, and people will always be able to joke about things to make it light, because if it's too heavy, you can't do anything with it. In order to make use of things, and Dharma is entirely about method, you have to be able to move it. But if it's very serious and very formal and full of respect, you're actually trapped by it. And you can be trapped by tragedy, and you can be trapped by the sacred. But the Dharma is there for us to use, and if you elevate it too much, it will make a prison for you. And if you put it, with other situations, if you're too polite about things, it will imprison you. Then you see that in Sialama, somebody comes and tells him a story about some terrible thing. He says, Gudrun, where's my strawberries? They just keep telling and they're crying, and he's thinking, yes, oh, now you go. Don't get it, what is this? You come here with this big fucking burden, what am I going to do with it? Take it away. And in some way, the person feels quite insulted, but now they have something else. They have the burden and they have the slap. So they've got to carry both. And the slap is quite strong, so the burden is a little bit down. It's quite radical. Because if he was to say, oh, this is a very terrible thing that has happened to you, everything goes into that thought. And for sure, much worse things will happen in our lives. Eventually we will die in our own shit. It's not a very romantic thing to die. So we do a bit more practice, and again, if we just stay with this 3R method, because you can go in all directions from that. Maybe at this time we particularly just try to keep some sense of distraction. Try to observe the pattern of your own distraction, how you lose the state. And when that happens, just gently bring yourself back into awareness by, as soon as you know that you are distracted, just become aware that you are distracted, and then stay with the awareness, stay in the presence of the one who knows they are distracted. So you don't have to move very far from where you are. Even if you suddenly realize you're falling over like this, you don't have to suddenly stand up straight. You can just be aware, because meditation is not sitting up. Meditation is being aware. You can fall over. It doesn't matter. You can become very restless and be moving around. You can just move around. Other people can take care of the noise, but you can move around and just be aware, oh, this is what my body is doing. So the key thing is the awareness, which is unchanging, and all this stuff changes. The awareness is the beer and the rest is just the foam. The foam will go back into the awareness. Okay, shall we try that for a bit? One of the big lessons that we all have to learn in life is delayed gratification.
What? Delay?
Delayed gratification means not having your desire or wish gratified, satisfied immediately.
Okay.
Children have to learn that.
Also Aufschub von Befriedigung.
Yeah.
And it's quite an interesting thing, because children have to learn that not to get it in the moment doesn't mean that it won't ever come. And that in fact not having it in the moment is better, which is actually quite an insane idea if you want something. I was looking at Denise's daughter this morning. She's quite into instant gratification. She sees something and she points at it and she wants it. And one of the things, again, about these Buddha realms like Sangdopalri, and the whole notion of life after death and going to a better place, is that it's a support for delayed gratification. And very often it is oppressed people who pray most for that situation. In Britain, I think it's no accident that the people who go to church most regularly and with most enthusiasm are Afro-Caribbean women of middle age who've been definitely badly betrayed by men, and they wear very nice clothes on Sunday, very nice hats, and they all go in big groups together, and they go to church and sing and have a really good time. And they really believe Jesus is going to do something for them. And nobody else is doing anything for them. They have shit jobs, cleaning in the underground or working in a hospital. They have lots of kids, and then their own daughters have kids and give them to look after. So they have nothing but all this shit, but they have Jesus. So it's very important in a system like that to have delayed gratification, because there isn't immediate gratification available. Now, if we think of this as meditators, one of the problems in the meditation is thoughts arise which are very fascinating. And we get pulled into it, that is distraction. So how can we bring delayed gratification into meditation? From the Hinayana position, what they try to do is to put a kind of wedge. Wedge?
Keil.
For cracking wood or something. In between the object of fascination and yourself. By giving it a negative reading. By saying, these things that attract you are actually poisons. They are going to kill you. Yeah? So you have a lot of reflection on the world as a dangerous place, and attachment as a poison, and attractive things as being things which intensify the poison you already have in your body. So don't be involved. So you see something and you want it, but you have to know that it's bad for you, and so you shouldn't do it. It's a kind of the sort of approach that's used in Alcoholics Anonymous for thinking about alcohol. So we have an addiction to pleasurable things, and then we realize this pleasurable thing is actually a bad thing, and we have some kind of error inside us which makes us addicted to these things. But if we go with that addiction, although immediately we get the gratification, actually we're poisoning ourselves more. And some of that kind of reflection is useful as well, because the advantage in Dzogchen is that we make use of all these other views. So if we find in our meditation that our minds return to particular scenarios, when we start to see the point at which we go on the level of distraction, we can then see what is the power of particular kinds of thoughts, and then outside of the meditation take up this more Hinayana view of seeing the negative aspects of the trigger. And in that way we try to make it less powerful, less seductive for ourselves. But the essential method of Dzogchen is not that we should delay gratification, but as we looked before, is that we get gratification immediately on this level, so we don't look for the gratification on this level. So when we get distracted, that's usually a sign that we are not gratified on the basic level. That is to say, we are not in a state of awareness. We are in a state of consciousness, and ego consciousness is always hungry for stimulus, because it doesn't exist without an object. It has to have an object in order to be in existence, because it's in this horizontal frame of dependent co-origination, where each thing is only in existence because of the other things it's connected with. And so if these other things are not there, ego will stop existing. So it has to keep pushing and stirring things up. So if we accept this, when we get distracted in meditation, we are distracted because we've lost it. It's not then a question of being interested in the things we get distracted in, because that doesn't matter too much. That's just the pattern of our karma. The key thing is to try to return to the place before the possibility of distraction. But that is difficult. That is difficult. Because the kind of experience that we have of that openness is certainly at first quite weak, and the power of the thought is very, very strong. It's like if a child has had lunch and then somebody puts some nice chocolate on the table, the child says, "Give me chocolate." You say, "Well, you just had your lunch, you're not hungry anymore. Look, you still have some potato on your plate." And it's very obvious that the felt experience of satisfaction from the lunch is no protection against the power of the chocolate, because the chocolate opens up a different aspect of hunger. So this again is where energy is quite important, because if we're trying to do too much of that work with thoughts and conceptualization and reminding ourselves, we get pulled into this struggle. So if you get very distracted and you're doing the meditation on your own, it's very good to get up, just go for a walk a little bit, wash your face, do something that shifts your energy, and then come back into the practice. And see, for this reason that Dzogchen meditation is quite difficult to do with other people, because it is a very individual practice. What you need in order to be in tune with yourself will not be the same as for other people. So group practice, where you're trying to get into a beat, is not helpful. Whereas if you're doing tantric practice, it's very helpful to do it together, because it's about building up a particular kind of energy, of devotion or whatever. And the group all being in the same pulse helps to bring a kind of engagement, like singing with a choir. You feel you can sing louder because you know your voice will also be covered by other people's voices, so you get more confidence to belong, because you're not observing, you're participating in Tantra, so fully getting into it. Whereas in Dzogchen, this observation has to be there, so it's always a little bit, not exactly passive, but more on the awareness side. So one has to make micro. And that's why when we practice together, it's very important that each person takes the responsibility to do what they want. And if you want to lie down in the meditation and have a sleep, that's fine. If you want to get up and go out of the room, make a cup of tea, that's fine. And other people will just stay in the meditation. If they hear a noise or whatever, they need to integrate that. That really, I think, is very important. Because in that way, the meditation practice becomes similar to life outside. When I go into the hospital, people do what they do. They don't do what I want them to do. So I have to be able to integrate them into my meditation. I can't say to them, behave in this way because I need you to do that, otherwise I lose my meditation. They don't give a fuck. It will be the same for all of us. So actually, meditating with people, if the people are authentic, and if we don't feel shame about our conditions, is very helpful.
Mm.
So if you find that you yawn or you get bored, that's also very helpful, because you can just be bored and be with yourself being bored. Because one of the most difficult things for us is to abandon the desire to be loved, which is this social regulation. If I do what everyone else does, if I find out how to fit in, people will like me. So people who are disruptive to other people usually are not welcomed. Whereas if we are trying to meditate, someone else's disruption is always useful. And being true to ourselves is much more important than being true to other people. Because we cannot really be true to other people unless we are deeply true to ourselves. And the only way to get to this deeper understanding is through ourselves. Shall we do a little bit more practice and then stop at 1?
I would prefer to go for a walk.
Yeah? Now? You can go
I
for a
mean,
walk now?
Yes, I mean, if we can do what we want, I would prefer to go for But if other people would like to,
You can do the walk
the
as
walk
practice.
as
Yeah?
practice, I would prefer
Good
than
idea.
sitting.
Yeah.
I mean,
Ja.
Good.
Ich bleib hier.
wo jeder was hat will.
Doch, ja.
Das gehen alle haben.
Ja. Regnet es oder regnet es nicht?
Ich glaube, das Beste von auch, das weiß ich nicht.
Ja. Man guckt dann mal, was denn da passiert ist. Das ist echt so, wirklich, echt so ein Goldstück, diese kleinen Beinchen.
Der hatte hoffentlich nicht nur kleine
Und
Beine.
die kleinen Beinchen.
Auch andere kleine Sachen.
Ja, der ich bin total verliebt. Ja. Stolz. Und ist echt mal das erste Mal Liebe gegessen. Mit den kleinen Kindern. Wir müssen vorbei, dann ist es zu kommen. Wieder gemacht das mal.
Okay. Just say a little bit more about the Dzogchen view, then we can do some more practice and then see if there's any questions. With this refuge and bodhicitta that we say, this is not at all in the Dzogchen tradition, because it is saying, it's a general Buddhist refuge and bodhicitta, and it says, I will take refuge until I'm enlightened, and I will work hard to gain qualities and merit which I will use to benefit other beings. Both of these statements speaking of a kind of constructivist view, in which enlightenment is something which I will gradually bring into creation due to the accumulation of these qualities. And there is in Tibetan a big literature looking at these two divergent views, one that we have to go through graded paths towards enlightenment, and the other that enlightenment is something which is always there and which is covered over, and the work is to remove the covering. But when the covering is removed, enlightenment is there full and complete in itself. And these are very different views, but particularly in the Nyingma tradition, they're woven in together. And this is one of the things we find, that there are many internal inconsistencies in Dharma views, because there are historical movements of development of Dharma which have got woven together into a big tapestry, the total effect of which is very warm and helpful. But when you look at it, there are particular lines of conflict. And this becomes particularly clear in the area of ethics, which I think it's always useful to look at. If we take the view of the refuge, we are going to protect ourselves from being too dangerous by aligning ourselves with Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, who are by definition good. And then we are going to make ourselves good by practicing generosity, patience, diligence, meditation, and so forth, the 6 or 10 paramitas. So we have an agenda that we're going to do, and by the end of this process of becoming good, we will become Buddhas, and when we become Buddhas, then we will help people. Because having become truly good, everything we do will be good, and anybody who saw what we did would see that it was good. Yeah? Now this is in some ways the problematic position of the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama is in the world now as a good man. He is maybe the last good man in the world. It's a very old Jewish story. But if the Dalai Lama is good, then Buddhists are good. In which way are they good? They're good in the way that Christians recognize. So the Dalai Lama has been purchased by the Christians as a definition of Christian ethics. The Dalai Lama does more and more things with Christians. He's even written a commentary on some of the Gospels and the Bible. And what he stands for is being a monk, not having too messy a life, not being wild and crazy, but being very clear, very reliable, and always saying good things. He's like a good bishop. And that, of course, is one of the discourses of goodness. And he is from the sect started by Tsongkhapa, the Gelugpa sect. And Tsongkhapa, in his establishment of the sect, said, the people of Tibet cannot trust these Nyingmapas who do funny things, who say one thing and do another, and whose lives are a mess. My people will be monks, and they will keep their vows, and they will be very, very reliable. Again, there's clearly nothing wrong with that. That's a very good aspiration. But what it does is it sets up a metaphor in which confusion should be removed and clarity and order should be placed centrally. If we do this, then 99.9% of the world population are bad. And then it's very difficult to believe that at the heart of all beings is Kuntu Sangpo, is this effortless, essential goodness. But if we believe in Kuntusampo, then we have to believe that everything is good. But if everything is good, then what is the difference between good and bad? So again, we are back with this level that it is this ground nature which establishes the vertical axis, which is good as Kuntusampo. And then on this horizontal level of interaction, there is still discrimination of good and bad. And that the Gelugpa style is to speak a lot onto this level and to keep this level quite secret. It's because they say we will be monks in public and tantric practitioners in secret. But then they set up, you should always be kind and helpful, like this. So it is making a cut in this level and saying good on one side, bad on the other. And that functionally makes this kind of integration rather difficult. So, and then we come to the question of ethics, because in Dzogchen, one main thing that we try to practice is the self-liberation of all that arises. That is to say, when any thought is coming, by understanding that the ground of all thoughts and feelings and sensations is this unborn emptiness, we don't cling to the manifestation and put good things on one side, bad things on the other, but we allow them to come and go, to come and go. We don't try to hang on to the good and push away the bad, and we don't try to hang on to the bad and push away the good. We are the same to everything. This is called this wisdom of equality, of even approach to everything. In Mahamudra they talk of it as one taste. Good things have one taste, bad things have the same taste, the taste of emptiness, because they are looking always at what is below the surface and not the manifest content. So you try to self-liberate thought, sensation, feeling. Now, part of sensation and feeling is also the totality of experience. So I'm also trying to self-liberate whatever you are doing. So when one is self-liberating the whole field. So if somebody does something that you like, you self-liberate that. You don't hang on to it. If somebody does something you don't like, you self-liberate that. You don't get into being very angry with people and having enemies for a long time. And you also don't get into kind of making special friends as if that's going to be the solution to life. Because friends will turn into enemies and enemies will turn into friends. Life keeps turning on. When we sort out this person is my friend, we sort it out on the basis of some qualities we can identify. But these qualities all arise due to circumstances. And the circumstances change, and then friendship changes. For whatever reason, it's no longer possible to speak to the person or feel so safe with them or feel so loved by them. And so there's a change in the mood. So self-liberating self and other introduces a kind of spaciousness into the relationship. One's not so intense about one's own feeling, and one is not so disturbed about other people. When I was living in a house with Sialama in Bengal a long time ago, he and his wife would often have disagreements. And she would get into saying, yeah, but what about this, what about that? And he would always say, which means just leave it there. Oh. And it's my ear, it's always twisting my ear. And this is traditional male discourse, of course, but was also, he'd always say, don't take it so seriously. People do this and people do that. Oh, what are we going to do about it? He said, I'm not the king of India. What am I going to do? Just don't worry about things you can't control. And in many ways, this is quite a good philosophy. It stands against a lot of what we have in the West. For example, this thing with Kosovo. Television is relentlessly showing these images with an incitation that we should all go to war with that country. And then you get some people, usually these right-wing people, who say it's not our business, why should our soldiers go and die in this fucking foreign field, and anyway, we don't do any trade with them, leave them. They want to kill each other, let them kill each other. But then the socialist people say, no, suffering is universal, we must stop this. In the very basic Hinayana teaching on the 10 sinful or unskillful actions, there are 4 of speech. And one of the sins of speech is getting involved in quarrels and conflicts that aren't yours. But is it ethical? How can we allow the killing of children in Yugoslavia and not do anything? But at the same time, if you go into Yugoslavia, you have to kill people there. So what do? It will be messy one way or another. Well, but children being killed, this is very real. And this is always being heightened. Children are the most real thing in the world today. If anything happens around children, immediately alarm bells ring. Old people can be gassed or somebody put a cushion over their mouth, euthanasia is coming in, very good idea. Old people can go out, but the young people, we have to put them up on the throne. So, all the time we are being confronted with ideas of this is real and it's good, this is real and it's bad. Dzogchen doesn't view the world in this way. It says nothing is real in the sense of inherently real. Everything from the very beginning is just the energetic manifestation of this open dimension of condiscernible. So, the goal is through that to trust the nature of what occurs. Whatever comes, comes. Whatever goes, goes. Not to worry too much. Not to improve the world. It's not our job to be the guardian of the world. But this has implications because the goal of practice from this is this state of spontaneity or things arising effortlessly, what's in Tibetan is called plundru, in which your life is just as it is, like a river tumbling down a hillside. If you do that, you will definitely say things that upset and disturb other people. So you can self-liberate your own action. But then somebody says, you really hurt me when you said that. Now, what is the status of that? Should you self-liberate that person saying, you hurt me? Or should you take it seriously? If you take it seriously, what is happening? So maybe the goal is that somehow, again, we need this integration. We need to know that this is for self-liberation. From the very beginning, it's empty. And on this horizontal dimension, we need to take it seriously because it's not good to upset other people. Why is it not good to upset other people? We're not entitled to. But from the very beginning of time, the great gurus have always upset other people. So there is always then the question, what is your motivation, and are you really a Buddhist? Or are you really a Dzogchen practitioner? As we looked earlier today, the desire to be liked and to be loved is very, very powerful. And often because of that, we make compromises which are not very helpful. The more we do the practice, and the more we really understand the nature of emptiness, and we really see that that is the truth, not as a kind of dogmatic Christian creed kind of belief, but through a lived experience that actually nothing else is going on but this, then people who don't believe this are mad. That's what we see. We see that they are under the power of ignorance and they don't see the world the way it is. So, on one level, generally, we should be polite and kind to all beings, but we shouldn't go under their power. We shouldn't seek to put them under our power. We're not out there evangelistically trying to convert the world, but we also shouldn't go under their power. And so if somebody is pulling you into believing that everything you say is very real and you should be accountable and you should think before you speak, maybe you spend many, many lifetimes thinking before you speak, and that's the cause of being reborn in Samsara, if you move it from the human dimension. Because you then are thinking, why should I say this or that? Working something out, and it stops the spontaneity, it cuts this line of connection. And this area of ethics is really very difficult. That is why, to do the practice, we really, from the very beginning, we have to integrate these two dimensions. And you have to observe how to move. And there is no answer to this from the outside. If it's from the point of view of Tantra, there is an immediate answer to these situations from outside. You know, you have your tantric vows, you have the instructions on how to maintain the world as a deity, and that's what you should do under all conditions. That's what you should do, and you just do that, and that will be okay. But from this point of view, it's very difficult to see from on high what is the proper way of behaving. Because Dzogchen is not a helicopter. It's not that we are going outside the world to look down. It's not like we are becoming a god and looking at other people. But we are completely in our lives very close to our feelings and thoughts. And in that way there is no perspective apart. There is only a perspective in. That is to say, we use feeling, intuition, much more than view. We're not looking across, we're feeling it. So we are working with a very subtle attunement to the energetic system that is there. There is no objectivity in this. You don't have a line where you can say, well, this is my practice, and this is what I'm trying to do. If you don't like it, or if I've upset you in some way, I apologize, but this is what I'm trying to do. Because you're not intentionally trying to practice anything. Dzogchen is often described as non-meditation. It's the meditation of not meditating, because it doesn't have a conscious, intentional aim for that. So how will you know whether what you're doing is right or wrong? Worrying whether things are right or wrong is not helpful. Because what is right or wrong? You know, right or wrong, in a sense, you can go to a law court and they will tell you what is right or wrong. But we know that different countries have different systems of law, and so you get a different judgment in one country or another. That's why these people from Tunisia who are accused of doing the bombing, not Tunisia, Libya, who are accused of bombing the plane, they don't want to be tried in Scotland. They want to be tried somewhere else. At the same time, we have an anxiety about getting it wrong. This is the most important thing to watch. What is this basic fear that unless I get it right, I will be annihilated? This is the view of the ego. If you're viewing from the point of view of the ego, you will be very available to resonate with other people's ego discourse, because other people want you to behave in the right way. But this discourse of right and wrong is completely relative, contingent and culturally defined. What is possible for people to do today, their parents could never do, their grandparents certainly couldn't do. We have completely different freedoms. So what we regard as right and wrong in behavior towards children or old people has changed enormously. In England now, you cannot shout at a child, but you can ignore an old person. In the old days, you had to respect the old person and you could shout at a child. Which is right, you can say. So it's generally very difficult to know what is the right behavior. Should you hit children if they're bad? Who knows? Most cultures in the world hit children. Now the European Union decides it's a crime to hit children. We say we have cultural development, but Buddhism says we are going down into this Kali Yuga, everything's getting worse. So we've got completely different notions of whether we're in improvement or decline. And these, I think it's important to think about these issues because they occur day by day if we try to do this practice, where people insist, take me seriously. How should we hear that demand? Is that an invitation into a samsaric folie à deux? Because they say, take me seriously, I take you seriously. Why don't you take me seriously? Is it helpful to take people seriously? The real answer to these things can only come from the meditation, I think, because we experience that in the movement of the meditation. Generally speaking, though, if we practice self-liberation, we will not be harsh and rough people. We will actually be quite tender and quite open. The more open we are, the more sensitive we are to the nuances in the world. We pick up more energetically. So we actually can adapt more quickly. However, we don't have to gratify other people's expectations. To gratify people's expectations is to give them the sense that the world is here to make them feel comforted. So sometimes you may wish to do that, or sometimes you may find yourself doing it, but that is not necessarily better than disrupting someone's expectation. Because if you disrupt their expectation, you waken them up. And that awakening may be useful. It's like what we talked about earlier. How can you know how to behave? As I say, there is no helicopter up here that you look down like the police going over the city to see what is going on. You're like an old-fashioned policeman in the street and you hear someone fighting, you run around the corner and it's gone somewhere. Where to go? You don't know. So it's a different kind of view. It's viewing it within, and the task is just to stay present. And we stay present from the bottom up, from the depth of the view into the activity. If you go into the activity itself and lose the ground, you will never have any correct solution. Even if the world tells you you've led a very good life, you won't be practicing Dzogchen, you won't be very aware. You will be in social conformity. Yeah? So you can look at someone like Nelson Mandela, Nobel Peace Prize, very good man, no doubt a very good man, but he spent a long time in prison. He was in prison because he was a criminal. Now he's a very good man. And now we say the people who put him in prison are criminals. On that level it's also difficult. But no matter how good he still is completely involved in politics and difficulties. His mind, although his heart is very open, probably would imagine his meditation will not be very good because he is preoccupied with concerns. So being good is not necessarily a support for meditation, and it is not necessarily the best way to help people evolve. Because if you give people who are struggling comfort, you may actually make them stupid. This is Hegel's point in this master-slave discourse, that the slave comes awake and the master goes to sleep. So the more comfort you give to people, maybe the less aware they are. And if the goal of life is awareness, if that's what we believe, that everybody has a Buddha nature, everybody has this possibility of being alive, fresh, open, in contact with the world, then to communicate with them, to help them, may be more important. And maybe there's not much more to say on that, but it's just that there is a particular kind of anxiety in Dzogchen practice, which is the anxiety of leaving the commitment to keeping the ego as a good person. Because the ego says, I need to work this one out and I need to know what is what, which is a kind of helicopter. It's not very high, but it's kind of bouncing on the ground, trying to see what should I do here in order to be like. When you go into presence, you don't know, it's like being a Gestalt therapist. If you're working really in the process with someone, you don't know whether what you said is right or wrong. You have some kind of intuition that you should help them. Maybe they don't want to be helped. Then you have to work with the consequences of doing that. But if somebody then sues you for hugging them and says this was a sexual assault, then you think, I'm not going to do this spontaneous Gestalt anymore. And that is, of course, what is happening in psychotherapy in Britain. People are very frightened to do any of these contact things. Unless they have a clear contract and they ask permission in advance. So there is no spontaneity. Dzogchen is the activity of just being present in spontaneity. So there is an anxiety which is in the zeitgeist of now, of our culture, about whether you can be like that. Siaram is like that all the time. He does things which are very upsetting to many people. He doesn't really bother him too much. In a sense, you could say he gets away with it because there is something else around him that somehow smooths it over, and even when he's beaten someone up in all sorts of ways, after they say, oh, that was quite interesting, I learned something from it. But he, in some ways, he helps them to realize that because he doesn't apologize. It's just there. Well, if you don't like it, go away. That's what he said. So somehow he is disrupting things. Now, so the key thing is maybe that it's not that we should become rude and vulgar, but there is a way that if we are committed to presence and to awareness, we have to believe in the value of that and just stay true to it. Because we are not being self-indulgent and getting our own way. We are actually trying to stay very close to the contour of the situation as it changes. That will not be comfortable for other people necessarily. So if we lose the sense of connection with the depth, we are likely to apologize.
Can you repeat this last
Mhm.
Yeah,
We lose contact
to the depth.
depth.
Then we're likely to apologize because then we get people saying,
I need
"Oh,
to apologize.
Entschuldigung.
Oh, okay.
because then it becomes real, and we say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I did that." But someone like Siarama doesn't say that because it was there, and he has moved on to something else. And in a sense, his thing is, "Well, why are you stuck with that? Let's move on." So that's always the issue. What is it that limits the other person from moving on? Well, sometimes it is the reassurance that the thing was serious. It goes both ways. I mean, with a small child, if they hurt themselves, then they run and say, "Mommy, mommy, mommy," and you give it a kiss and say, "Now it's better," and they run off again. So you can recycle it very quickly. But if they return again and again, then it's getting bad. There's too much attachment. So it's that kind of sensitivity about how we move this. Because the desire for us is always to be fresh and moving. Life is moving, so we want to be present in the moment of becoming. Like it says in the big Rigson practice, not going after past thoughts, not waiting expectantly for future thoughts, but just being here in the moment. Which means not being caught up in representations and moving thoughts around to create the world we want, but to be present in the world that we have. So ethics in Dzogchen don't come from any rule books. There is no clear guidance on how to be, except to be present. And if you're present, the other people will be fully or more intensively present for you. And if you see someone more, you're less likely to harm them. Because usually we do harmful things to people when we don't see them clearly. Now let's see if you have any thoughts about that or questions or differences or whatever?
As you said in the beginning of this talk, cutting off in the way of, oh well, I'm already past, why are you stuck with this problem, is general male discourse, also männliche Art, sich auszudrücken. Was hängst du an diesem alten Zeug? And I see that on many occasions around me, and I see it myself also. So I have to know that I'm pure, which I never know.
Mm.
So I just go on with it, and like the axe in the forest, this is my way to do it. So if you like it, okay, you can stay. If you don't, leave. Yeah, I don't see. Of course, there is no safety, no security, no sureness about one's own behavior, because it's always multi-layered, also in the effects on the other. But I don't feel much in contact with that vertical level, so I can't really claim that I'm doing that on pure motivation.
Well, that's good to be aware of. That's really the first thing for Dzogchen practice, is to excuse me, to be aware of one's own situation. And it's much better to recognize that you don't have much alignment with that than to fall into a fantasy that you have. Because that is then really dangerous.
Mm.
But maybe the thing is about being aware of what it is like to be a bit rigid and controlling. Describe it. We want to get our own way. We know how to manipulate other people with language or whatever it is. And just observing the process of that. What is this? What is the effect on me? It gives me a particular kind of security, but also a gap with other people. So if I want more intimacy, I'm going to have to let go of some of the security, which is a very dominant problem now, increasingly for women, but certainly it's very strong for men, that they prefer security and position to intimacy. And I think we could say Dzogchen is a path of intimacy. It's about very close relating. It's not about, it's not in the helicopter, it's not on top of the mountain.
I saw a man and a woman meeting at the side of the road, and they were both quite old. And she was really happy. She touched him, and he was oblivious. He had his cap on. Walked across the street when the light was red. She stood there, waiting till the light would turn green so she could follow him. It was deplorable. He wouldn't communicate. Men, or old men especially, they're not sociable. They can't live with anyone.
Mm. But if they don't live with a woman, they die much quicker.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the necessary thing.
Good. They will die out.
Yeah. Don't worry, a new generation is coming. And I mean, it's not exactly fitting, but I mean, in this Tibetan tradition, they have this idea of wisdom as female and method as male. And in a sense, you can see that this man is into method. He's doing things in his way. And when method gets cut off from the purpose, from the meaning of method, it just becomes silly. It's just turning in space, like men talking about car engines or something. No, there's nothing human in it. So maybe in that you can see that the focusing on developing wisdom is maybe the most important thing for you. That developing wisdom is the most important thing. because out of wisdom the real compassion can arise. And the danger would be to get into technology and kind of anxiously thinking about things, trying to have a game plan.
I heard from Surya 2 weeks ago that he spoke in Frankfurt that compassion is part of method, which I couldn't understand then, didn't ask. It was a large assembly. What you said yesterday pointed at this, but what you say now contradicts it.
Mm-mm. No. No, I mean, usually it says that method is the male and wisdom is the female, but the method is compassion. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have in the West we have a different idea. We have an idea that women are compassionate and that men are clear, but in the Tibetan thing is the other way around. That the woman's nature is wisdom, because she represents emptiness. And in a sense, that comes because women hold situations much more. Like in the nice example you gave, this old woman is holding him in some way. She's there for him. And she's also holding the world. She sees what color the lights are. But he can't be held. He's locked into something. So wisdom is about the space to be available. And women, certainly in Britain, women usually do the social organization in couples. They arrange parties and all of this thing, they take most care of the kids, they hold space, they have a sense of welcome and beauty and all of that. And men fill the space with that kind of activity. So filling space and doing things is a form of compassion, but it needs space in it as well. And women have nowadays certainly have a much better integration of these two than most men do. Most men need a woman to take care of them, to hold themselves together, whereas women can very often integrate both.
They can't screw in light bulbs.
Oh.
Bitte was?
Können keine Glühbirnen reinschauen.
The last bastion of male power.
That is your
No other ideas?
What programming video recorders? How about that?
Yeah.
Nothing bad. You're useless.
It's nice to use some men to do it.
Just an excuse to get you us into your.
No.
At least they feel worth.
Yeah.
You give them some opportunity.
Something to do.
Yes.
Otherwise they're completely redundant.
Procreate and kill.
Yeah. Because the important thing is the idea that method or compassion arises out of wisdom. Because the function of method is to help other people as they are. That is the most important thing. That particularly in the Theravadan tradition, or certainly the Tibetan view, it's not necessarily correct historically, but they would say India Buddhism provides lots of rules that you should follow for monks and nuns. So you should align yourself with these rules. And you shouldn't have too much connection with other people. So if you want to really practice the Dharma, give up the world, become a monk or a nun, and follow the rules. And so then you have a gap between you and the world that keeps you safe. And if you go towards people in the world, you get into trouble. So don't do that. But in Mahayana Buddhism, they say you should go towards other people, but first of all, you have to realize that everyone is empty. Because if you go towards people without emptiness, you will get lost. But with emptiness, you won't take the other so seriously, you won't take yourself so seriously. And that then all these paths build up to Dzogchen, which holds the same view. It's a Mahayana Buddhist view. But that wisdom or understanding of emptiness must come before method. Because method here is method for the helping others, not so much method to help yourself. The Buddha taught many methods, but method here means methods for being in the world out of wisdom, through wisdom. And so you can have lots of technical knowledge, but it won't do you any good. Like it says in the Bible, what benefit does it do you if you gain the whole world but you lose your soul? Buddhism will say, if you lose this sense of emptiness or this deep connection with the source of being, you can be very busy and competent up here, but you get nothing. You just get a delusion of power, and then you get frightened of death or whatever it is. So method has to come from wisdom. That's also part of the sexual analogy. All beings, male or female, are born out of our mothers. This mother's womb represents emptiness. So that's a really important focus in the practice, and that's why we do this, looking at where does the mind come from and where does it stay. And although that kind of practice is very difficult, it's really important, because without really getting the taste of the nature of the mind, we're just zooming on this upper level. We're moving representations around. We say, I'm a Buddhist, and I've been to India, and I've done this, and I've done that, and I know this mantra, and I've had this initiation. And we have many, many representations which give us a kind of social identity, but it's all dependent on memory and brain construction, of putting words and symbols together. But if we lack our own direct experience, we have a problem. Any other thoughts?
Before this things, we had to be present, to be present. And I think it's very difficult to be present all the time. I think it's impossible. Of course, I can be present after meditation or, well, something, sometimes when it's very noisy, I can be present. But my feeling or thinking about to be present is, to have awareness every time. And I think that's, for me, it's impossible. It's if I think really about it, it could make me crazy, because what is present when I'm present and so on, and I think it's a very, very hard
Are you
thing.
present just now? As you're speaking?
Not 100%. Because, I look for words, I have the thought in my head what I'm saying, I see the trees over there, and I don't know if this is to be present, to see this all, or to speak, and to and to say what I want to say. It's I think it's this present is very complex, and for me sometimes very difficult.
But it sounded from what you were saying there that you were aware of the various kinds of distractions and limitations that are around. So you can get distracted by what's outside the window, you can be predicting something, you can be unsure maybe for the words. So there's various ways in which you can lose focus, like on a bicycle on a bumpy road, you can start to wobble, but somehow you keep going. Now in order to keep going, you could cycle very fast and go into a tunnel of just speaking. Right? but you can also relax a bit and be aware of this. The tendency to distraction will always be there, but you don't take it. You see, again, this is again one of the big problems in Buddhism, is because of the way that enlightenment is talked about. Whether it's talked about as a thing, like here is nirvana, and when you get over to nirvana you will be safe, like a refugee in Kosovo thinking, let's go to England and then we'll be safe. Once we get there and we get a permission to stay, we never have to leave, our enemies are far away and our life will be good.
But somehow it is like this. I mean, when I think, I know a Kosovo one who comes to clean up my apartment.
Yeah.
It's quite a good job. I mean,
It's quite a good job,
But they're not safe. If I'm
he is safe. I mean,
no, she isn't safe.
Nobody will kill him.
Where do you know that?
Yeah.
Some of our neo-Nazis are coming and say, go away. Too. She isn't safe.
Okay, but let's not get too much
Sorry.
into the example of that. But if we keep the basic principle,
Yeah.
the person can still
Yes.
die from internal reasons or external reasons. Anyway, they know they will die.
Yeah.
So they are relatively safe, but the safety will last for a while. No? When death is coming, the fact that they are living in Germany may help them to be more aware when they die.
To be aware and to be calm in mind.
Yeah. But they will still have disturbance from themselves. But the idea is that the Buddha somehow has got to a place where they are completely free of any trouble. The Buddha is just sitting, no disturbance, completely calm. And that this calmness will always continue. So why does the Buddha need to be aware? Obviously he has to be aware for the sake of others, but doesn't have to be aware for themselves. This is the idea of Dharmakaya. And this is a bit philosophical theory style, but for meditators the world is not really like that. Because it's always very nice to do things in theory, but the praxis is slightly different. So for meditators, we know that the mind is moving. Because the mind is moving, things arise all the time. Now, we believe that the Buddha's mind is not just his mind by itself, but the nature of the Buddha's mind, in becoming very big, holds the existence of all sentient beings in it. Yeah? So, we say that the Buddha is omniscient, means he can see everything. So the Buddha can see the contents of our minds. Our mind and his mind is not different. Yeah? So, that means he has our troubled thoughts in his mind. Yeah? So, even when he's a Buddha, he's got troubled thoughts in his mind. So, if the Buddha has troubled thoughts in his mind, how come the Buddha doesn't get lost?
Aware of his emptiness.
So, he has to be aware all the time, because the presence of these distracted thoughts could distract him. When we say the Buddha is free of distraction, it means he knows how not to be distracted. It doesn't mean that nothing ever comes to distract him. And I think that is the really important thing to recognize. If you're a meditator, you see that. But if you look only at the statue of the Buddha, and the Buddha has no problems. We who have problems say, Buddha, come and help me, have no problems. But for example, if you know how to ride a bicycle, you can show someone else how to ride a bicycle. But if you can ride a bicycle, you can also fall off a bicycle. Maybe you've been riding a bicycle for 30 years and you've never fallen off since the first day you learned. That doesn't mean that you can't fall off. What it means is every time you're riding your bicycle, you are keeping the balance. The balance is not given with the bicycle. You don't buy a bicycle and they give you a bag of balance. The balance is dynamically maintained. Yeah? So the Buddha is dynamic. This is the key thing. The Buddha is dynamic. And that's why in the Dzogchen tradition they say that the mind does everything. There is a famous Dzogchen text called Kunchi Japo, means the king that does everything. This king that does everything is the mind. The mind creates samsara, the mind experiences nirvana. Or you could even say the mind creates nirvana. These are two experiences. They come from the same source. If you recognize it, you have nirvana. If you don't recognize it, you have samsara. Huh? So even when you recognize it, you have to keep recognizing it, because if you don't recognize it, you don't have it. That's the very important thing, that we, like the Buddha, having commenced on the journey, can keep continuing, but that Buddhas also are aware. Because if they stop being aware, they will get lost. Awareness is a continuity.
Isn't the difference that a Buddha don't need effort to be aware? And he don't need to put work or something like that.
That's right. That's right.
Effortless self,
Like non-meditation.
Like non-meditation.
But I was always thinking that that is really a point where you can fall out of the meditation. It's like we got one teaching about this status of meditation. That first is a bit like a waterfall, then is more calm than a river, then later is like you are at the ground of the sea, and the last point is like you are a mountain, or the meditation is like a mountain, and it's very difficult to move a mountain. That means that the meditation is so stable that no matter what happens, you can't fall out, or you can never lose the thread of the awareness.
Yeah, that's a theory. And I remember I asked many Tibetan lamas about, why is it that Buddhas don't fall out of enlightenment? Usually they would get very angry with me for asking that question and say I was very stupid. The most helpful person on that was Siya Lama, who said, well, we Tibetans believe that the Buddha will not become stupid again. But if you are a meditator, then you should believe that the Buddha will become stupid, because everything's impermanent. So don't be too attached to the idea of the Buddha being saved, but make a commitment to practice awareness always. And I think how meditators think of these things a bit different from the dogma, because the dogma is about protecting the idea of the Buddha as a safe place of arrival. And there are many Dharma texts which are about that. They are still saying, here is samsara and here is nirvana, and you go from one to the other and you're safe. But in the Mahayana tradition they say nirvana rests nowhere. And in the Dzogchen tradition in particular they say samsara and nirvana arise from the same point. And it's on that point of awareness that Kuntu Zampo is sitting. But it means that both paths are always open. They're always open. But once you know that they're open, you won't take it. It's like I every day, if I chop something with a sharp knife, I could cut my wrist open. But I look at my wrist, I look at the knife, I don't want to cut it.
Yeah,
But I know I could cut my wrist.
It's, for example, the pure land. I mean, in many prayers we go to the pure land. Okay, but if you're at a special point of view, everything can be the pure land.
But the pure land is impermanent. The prayer, the main prayer that people say in Tibet to the Pure Land is the prayer by Karma Kagyu, Raga Asli, who wrote the Dechen Monda, the prayer for rebirth in Dzogchen. And at the end of the prayer it says very clearly, after some time Amitabha will retire and he will go from Dzogchen, and at that time Chenrezi will take over. And then Chenrezi will also retire and Chana Dorji will take over.
It's just a change of management. It doesn't
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but-
doesn't matter.
No, but he won't be there.
Well,
The
it's
quality of,
important that I'm there.
quality of the hotel may go down. You may think, the breakfast isn't the same.
Well, the Bahamas like Bahamas. That's the problem.
Yeah, but I like black pudding for my breakfast. What's the point of being in the Bahamas if you don't get black pudding? It's not the same.
It's blood, is it?
Yeah, blood pudding.
Warme Blutwurst.
It sounds so nice, blood pudding.
But I think it's an important point that the impermanence is in everything. And we construct these ideal forms as methods, but the reality is we have to practice. Like it says in the 3 statements of Garab Dorji. First point is to recognize clearly the nature of the mind, to wake up to this open dimension. Secondly is to resolve all doubts. That is to say, to inquire into all the ways in which you can lose awareness, and particularly do the practice of long day. And then thirdly, it means to continue in confidence. And that's an important thing. It says it's a continue in confidence, which means to always believe that there is nothing other than this. Although there are many other possibilities of seeing the world and doing other kinds of practice, you continue in the certainty that this is the case. And that's very important because, like it says in the prayer for being reborn in Dzogchen, if you are born with good karma, you get born there in a lotus. And as soon as you are born, your lotus opens and you see Amitabha's face smiling, and he says, hello. That's very nice.
Nice.
And the Christians had the same idea. If you are a good soul and you get up to heaven, the trumpets go and the door opens and God is there, welcome. You sit over there. In reality, for meditators, you get enlightened and maybe nobody's there. It's like,
Maybe, yes,
and maybe not. You may get enlightened with trumpets. You have that karma. You are a drummer, so probably you have a special. Get the dancing the knees and a little down.
No darkness.
Yeah, these things are really quite important. Trungpa, in his autobiography, describes how he does his first real retreat, and then he comes out of the retreat and he's got this sense of his meditation experience, and he goes to tell his teacher, and his teacher has died.
In that moment.
No, during the retreat.
So, but because he wanted the completion, he wanted the pat on the head and the trumpet, and now here you are. And he had to confirm himself. But in the Tantric tradition, they say, on the moment of gaining enlightenment, all these Buddhas come from the 5 families, and they give you an initiation, and they pour water on your head. And as the water comes from the pot from each of these things, it's in the 5 different colors, and on the top of your head comes this crown with 5 points from this water, of course. And then you are completely there. And you know that you're there because you have the hat. And if you doubt it, you look in the mirror. Mom, look at that.
Du hast ihn doch schon, was willst du mehr?
These are very interesting metaphors. How will we know that something is real? I mean, this is why people desperately say in relationship, do you love me? Tell me you love me. But you know I love you. No, but tell me you love me. Because to trust the feeling is very difficult. We want the confirmation, we want the pat on the head. But then often we go for the pat on the head, but no feeling. You get the certificate. Many people get a qualification as a psychotherapist and never believe they're a therapist. Many people grow up and get an adult passport but never believe they're a man. I mean, most men don't believe they're men. Somehow feel that to be a man is something much bigger than them. So it's quite an important issue. How do you know that you're okay? Do you need someone to tell you? How do you know? And who can you believe knows more about you than you?
The guru.
Optimist.
That's his job.
Clearly a very mature, developed Dharma group now. Full confidence. Maybe we should take a little break and have some fresh air. Should we take a break for 5, maximum 10 minutes? And then
Okay.
do some more practice? And you could maybe think also in this moment about the time. Because I was said before that I could come on the 5th, 6th of December, but that's quite close to now. And I don't know when I will come again after that. And it might be the 3 main traditions of Dzogchen that are in the world at the moment are the general Nyingmapa tradition, and there are many people teaching that, including some Kachupa lamas. There are the lineage that Norbu teaches from, which was not so open in Tibet, but it's a very interesting reading that he has. And then there is the Bonpo tradition of Dzogchen as well. And there are several people who teach the Pern tradition who come, including Tenzin Namdak, who comes to Germany sometimes and to Switzerland, also to England. And then I think it's a very good, nice idea if you can meet these lamas, particularly say Tenzin Namdak and Namkhe Norbu.
Tenzin?
Namdak, who was main teacher in the main Bonpo monastery in Dolanchi near Solon, Himachal Pradesh.
Haben wir da das Buch von dem?
And he has some books translated in English now.
Ich glaube, das ist der Lehrer von. Is that the teacher of Tenzin Wangyal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and Namkhe Norbu will be teaching in France, and he'll be doing a long weekend retreat in Carmaling in North France. So if you've never met him, it's maybe good because I think now he's going away from Europe for another 2 years, and his health has, he works very hard, his health is not so great, he does get more tired. You never know, you might never meet him again, but just to get the transmission from him could be very nice.
Which kind of retreat is it?
I'm sure it's a retreat where he'll be doing the transmission of this Dzogchen presence and doing some practice together, and I don't know, it's probably on the same day, on some recognition of the mind and basic practices like that.
You know when? I mean about.
I may have it in my diary. But it's, I mean, according to the Tibetan tradition, it is the kind of living connection that makes the transmission. And that you can't really do it from books. And I think that's true. You know, you get the sense of somebody's energy and how they are in the world and what they can say and what they can't say. And that makes a big difference. And these older teachers are definitely vanishing, and they have been doing this practice all their life. And they also have a kind of seriousness and lack of egotism, which is quite important and quite refreshing. And some of these younger lamas, although they can be very nice and very inspiring, they're brought up already quite westernized, and how they are is very different. They're more into being themselves and being funny and doing all of these things. And so it's a brief opportunity. Yeah, he's doing a retreat in Marseille.
In Marseille?
In Marseille, that's a bit far, but that's
That's more in south.
from the 6th to the 8th of November. And he is in Paris from the 20th to the 22nd, and he is in Karmaling from the 27th to the 29th.
Who's in Cameroon?
Irgendwo in Nordfrankreich.
And if you phone
Do you have the
the
address of
telephone,
Karmaling?
I don't have it, but it's not all that far from. Where is it near?
Is it in Bourgogne? Yeah?
It's not. It's north. It's north of Bourgogne. It's near Alsace. It's not
Isn't
down
it
from
with
it's,
very modern Gompa with big.
They may have built something like that. It's up a little valley. It's near. It's not so far. Anyway, I can give you a telephone number where you find the information. It's the number in Paris, if anyone's interested. It's 02 47 92 3097.
0247923097.
And I think it's someone called Laurent Maurice. I don't know who it is. Hello, Laurent. That's
Maurice.
All in November, huh?
Yeah.
well in November, and he will also be visiting the new land the Dzogchen community has.
New land?
They bought some new land in France.
Wow. Where?
I don't know exactly.
I know.
But anyway, so these are brief opportunities.
Naja, alles Französisch. Ach, so überrascht.
You think they translate into English?
Yeah, I should say
Frag mich nicht, kann mir sowas nicht merken.
he will be speaking in English. He may speak in Italian and translate it to French, but I think nowadays he's probably more likely to speak in English and to be translated into French. At Karmaling, there's plenty of people who could translate also.
There were rumors that he come to Power Move.
Uh-huh.
There were rumors that he would come to Power Move, but
Nobody knows.
no, I
Frag den Michael dann mal.
Genau.
Ja.
Ask Michael if he comes to the.
Ja.
Mhm.
Nein, keine Ahnung. Aber ich glaube, das war nicht bestätigt, als ich letztens im Power war. Das ist das Gleiche.
Also, it would be, if you're interested in this, it'd be useful to do learn some of the basic moves in Yantra Yoga. Some of you are already interested in that, so if you're meeting from time to time, you could do that, and there are some people who are teachers for that. I don't know if you teach that, so you could maybe do a day anyway and get these basic moves, because it's very useful.
In Düsseldorf, there's a training group.
It will be some way of thinking about maybe linking across, because there's something about sharing resources. And then the other thing I would suggest is that you can also think for yourselves, since you began doing Dharma, what benefits have you got from it, if any? And how do you think you got these benefits? And what more benefits would you like to get? And what do you think you have to do in order to get these benefits? Do a kind of audit for yourself, a kind of review. And think, am I using the time I use for Dharma efficiently? Do I get the real benefit out of it? And what is unclear for me? So that when we meet, you have real questions from your own experience about what is helpful or not. Because otherwise I say whatever I'm in the mood to say, and maybe it's helpful and maybe it's not. But it's also maybe more useful, since you are doing meditation practice, that we try to keep it close to the practice.
In relation to these benefits, I haven't read this book. I've carried it around for 2 decades now by, what's his name, Trungpa, I think, about cutting through spiritual materialism. It seems to point in that direction. So whenever I see some benefits coming, I say, no, I don't want to know this. I don't want to go for these things to be gotten, because that's not an illusion. It's a gimmick. It may be a method, but for me it would be catching me, trying not to have these things.
But we have to remember that Trungpa, before he died, set up this Shambhala training with epaulets and badges and saluting. I mean, he was not an enemy of spiritual materialism at all. He was a highly...
He may not be, but I am.
But if you don't know how you're doing, how do you know that it's not a waste of time? I mean, you can dedicate the result to other people, but you have to know whether you're dedicating something or not. You can give it away, but if you don't get it, there's nothing to give away. Well, because very often what happens is that we don't make progress because we are doing things wrongly. And so we have, if we can observe for ourselves, like if you're learning yoga or something, it really helps to have a teacher who can look at you, because most of us don't have such a clear awareness of our body that we can self-correct. We think we're standing straight, but actually we're off at a balance. Mm-hmm. So it's the same with the meditation. We have to look for ourselves and then try to show this is how I think it is, and then you can see that everything's true. But I don't have an intention we should get little badges. Maybe that would be nice. You might actually like that. Oh, yeah,
there's a photo of James.
Oh, wow. Good. Well, let's do some practice. What do you feel most in the mood to do? We could go into the practice through this magic lantern song, we can do it through these R's, we can do it with
Magic lantern.
Magic lantern?
I prefer.
Yeah. So we can do that just a few times, not for so long, but we do it in the same way, and we're using this to energetically bring ourselves a bit, we're all a bit tired, bring ourselves a bit up, and focus the mind, and then in this dissolving phase, it's not different from the 3 R's. We want to do it clearly but in a relaxed way, so that when this ball of light is dissolving, we really go into that. So we're using this visualization of the light the same way we use the sound ah. We just go out on this movement. Then just staying in that state. And when thoughts and feelings arise, the particular thing we do from the Dzogchen point of view is try to just stay with the arising out of the state we're already in. And go back to this exploration that the mind has no top or bottom, no sides, no color, no shape. There is nowhere else for these thoughts to come from but this open state. Everything has gone into this state. And so, whatever arises, don't worry about it. Just enjoy it as the manifestation of this state. Just be in a state of kind of pleasure and awe at this richness of the mind, however it is. And then we just stay like that for some time.